If you really want to understand how jazz standards works, then a good understanding of secondary dominants is essential, and it's a great way to understand how most songs are moving. In today's jazz guitar lesson, what I want to do is take the key of C and show you the possible secondary dominants that you're likely to get. Any resources that you see on the screen are available as a PDF. Check the description for that. If you're new here, jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturday, helping you practice jazz guitar with purpose. Please subscribe if you're new here. Now, on to the lesson. So to understand what a secondary dominant is, first we need to understand what a primary dominant is. Now, if we take the key of C major and harmonise the chords in sevenths, we get 7 chords, we attach Roman numerals to them, and we get the following chords. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, G dominant 7th, A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5 back to C. So we had one dominant 7th, chord 5. That is the primary dominant. So the most important chord in a song is chord 1. That's the stable home of it. A lot of songs will start on chord 1 or certainly finish on chord 1. And they'll always be sort of working back to chord 1. Now the way you get to chord 1 if you move away from it is by chord 5 usually. So you go like that, 5, 1, known as a perfect cadence. You know, that dominant 7th, that G7, the primary dominant, perfectly takes us back to chord 1. If we've got a song in C major, our primary dominant is G7. Any other dominants you see are referred to as secondary dominants because they're second to that G7, that primary dominant. And there are 2 types of secondary dominants which I'll come on to. And the first secondary dominants you want to be aware of first are the ones that are used to get to other chords in key. So for instance, G7 is how you get back to C in the key of C. But what if you want to use dominants to make more interesting moves to chord 2, chord 3, chord 4, chord 5 even, chord 6? Well, that's when we use secondary dominants. I'm going to go through each example that you get in the key of C. Let's do this with chords 2 to 6, so D minor, E minor, F, G and A minor. So how do we know what the dominant of a chord is? Well, the easiest way to do this is reference the circle of fifths. Take a D chord or a D bass chord, find it there on the circle of fifths. If you go 1 to the right, that's your dominant. So A is the dominant of D. If you want the dominant of A, let's put my marker on A, go 1 clockwise, 1 to the right, and we've got E, and so E is the dominant of A, so you'd use an E7 to get back to an A chord, whether it be a minor chord or a major chord. So on that circle of fifths, as you go round, it's going like 1 5 1 5 1 5 as you keep going round. Each time you go clockwise, it's a fifth away from where you start. So what we can do is we can use the dominant to make a more interesting move to any of the other chords in key. So take chord 2. We can use a dominant before chord 2 to make a stronger move to it. And that's why we use dominants, is for stronger moves to chords, to really take the progression somewhere and give it legs. So in the key of C, we know how to get to chord 1 with a dominant, we use G7. But what if we want to go to chord 2 via a secondary dominant? Well, let's reference our circle of fifths, find D on there, go 1 to the right, and we've got A. So we need to use an A7 for D minor. So we're going to go C major 7, A7, D minor 7. And that has a really strong pull. Listen again. 1, 2, 3. Really wants to get to that 2 chord. Now, we have an A chord in the key of C. We have A minor 7, as we saw a minute ago. Why not use that? Well, compare the difference. Here's C, major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7. And here's the dominant. Let's replace the A minor 7 with A7. There's actually only one note different between A minor 7 and A7, but it creates a stronger pull to it. It's like a leading note in that chord. Now on the music there, I described it as the 5-7 of 2. And a 5-7 chord is the dominant chord, so the 5-7 in the key of C is G7. But the 5-7 of 2 means the dominant chord of 2, which is an A7. So if you're in the key of C, the dominant you're likely to see before a D chord is an A7. What about getting to chord 3? So chord 3 is E minor in the key of C, and reference the circle of fifths again, and the dominant of E is B. So if we put a B7, it will take us to E. So let's try C major 7, B7, E minor. Let's hear that? That's got a really nice pull to that. So we're going to call that the 5-7 of 3. So that's, B7 in the key of C will take us to an E chord. And the next chord in key, F. So F, the dominant of F on our circle, is C. So what we need to do here is we need to make C a dominant. So we might go C major 7, C7, make it bluesy sounding to F. Listen to that. So G7 to F has that nice pull, compared to just going C major 7 to F. Why use it? It just gives you a stronger pull to it, listen. If I use a different voicing, you'll hear it more. There you go, I use that C7 up there instead. So that's the 5-7 of 4. So something to learn there. If you make the 1 chord a dominant 7th, it will take you to the 4 chord. But now we've got to the 5th chord, which is a dominant itself. So can we use a dominant to go it to a dominant? Yes, we can. So what's the dominant of G? It's D. So if we go C major 7, D7, G7. Obviously we get a D minor in the key, not D7, so it's out of key. That's a really nice move. Let's put a D minor there instead and see what it would sound like. C major 7, D minor 7, G7. Sounds fine. Of course it works, it's all in key. But that D7, the 5-7 and 5-7, has a stronger pull. What about using a secondary dominant to get to chord 6, A minor? Well, the dominant of A is E, so we need an E7. So let's go C major 7, E7, A minor. Now if I put the E chord that you get in the key of C normally, E minor or E minor 7, it won't sound anywhere near as good. Listen. It doesn't sound bad, but listen to this E7 now. I think it's more what we're used to hearing, specifically in a jazz context. You don't get one going to that 7th chord, the B minor 7 flat 5 too much, but one thing you do get is that last one to A minor, chord 6, is you're more likely to get the minor 7 flat 5 chord before the E7 like this. So this is like a minor 2 5 1, so you're more likely to get this. So C major 7 and then B minor 7 flat 5, E7 to A minor, and that's a minor 2 5 1. So B minor 7 flat 5, E7 to A minor. So we start in major feel, C major 7, then we use that minor 7 flat 5, E7, A minor to get to chord 6. Now it's all very well knowing this stuff, but we really need to apply it to a tune. So let's take this first section of All of Me. So we start on a C chord, then we go to a secondary dominant straight away. We go to E7. E7 wants to go to an A, and it does go to an A, but it goes to A7, another secondary dominant. That's the dominant of the 2 chord, D minor, so then it goes to your 2 chord. We then go back to the E7, but it goes to A minor, so chord 6. So that's another secondary dominant, the E7 that is. And then we're going D7, so that's the secondary dominant, and that's the dominant of the 5 chord, and we're working our way there via D minor 7, via 2-5 back to C. That's just an example there of how these things typically work in a song. Now all of the secondary dominants I've showed you so far I would describe as functional, and that is that they go to their intended destination. Say for instance a secondary dominant of an E7 in the key of C goes to an A minor. Now another thing that can happen is we can have non-functional secondary dominants, and those are dominant chords which don't go to their usual 1 chord. So say for instance, you know, like if you had an E7 that went up to an F chord for instance, or to a C chord for instance, that wouldn't be a functional secondary dominant because it doesn't fulfill its 5-1 resolution. And although in the key of C, like you could have a song where you could conceivably have any dominant chords, you know, off all 12 notes we've got, you could have, you know, 12 different dominant chords. But I think there's 2 that you really want to be aware of, and that's the tritone substitution, which is where instead of having a 5 chord, you have a tritone. Now if you take the progression D minor 7, G7 to C major, so 2, 5, 1. One of the most common substitutions is to swap out the G7, the primary dominant, for a tritone, which is if you take that G there and find this interval, and find, you know, go a string down and fret higher, you get that, the devil's interval it's sometimes referred to as. You build a dominant chord off that horrible note, which is a D flat 7, and you get this D minor 7 chord 2, the tritone, which is known as the flat 2 7 because it's this, you know, built off a flat 2, to C major 7. So a D flat 7 should go to a G flat chord, but in this instance, this tritone substitution of the primary dominant is going to C major 7. So there's an example of one that doesn't go where you'd expect it, although really that is a very conventional thing in jazz language and harmony. And the other common one is referred to as the backdoor dominant, where you get a dominant chord a tone beneath chord 1, which is, you know, we're in key of C, so the tone beneath would be B flat, C, B, B flat. So this is a very common progression. So C major 7, 7, then F minor 7, B flat 7, that's the secondary dominant, to C. And that's another way to get back home, to get back to chord 1, by using a dominant, a tone beneath. But you know, a B flat 7 chord should go to an E flat chord. So that could easily have gone, you know, C, F minor 7, B flat 7, E flat major as a way to move away from that. But instead, it's used as a way to get back to 1. That's the start of Yardbird Suite, one to check out. So takeaways from today: if you're looking at a new standard for the first time, look for all the dominants. Think, right, what key are we in, and what is the primary dominant, what is chord 5, and all the others, you know, you're thinking of they're the secondary dominants, and if so, you're starting to think about, you know, are they functional or non-functional? So are they going to where you expect or not? Get used to trying to spot tritones. So tritone is a dominant chord built off the flat 2, so a semitone above the root of the key. And the backdoor is a dominant chord, a tone beneath the root of the key. So if you're in the key of G, the backdoor would be chord F7, the tritone would be A flat 7 or G sharp 7. And I'll put some videos on the screen if you want to check out some more of these concepts in more detail. I'll put my video up about the backdoor dominant and also my lesson on All of Me, which is a great example of secondary dominance. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Please leave me a comment, hit that like button. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and every Saturday. Until next time, you take care.